Okay, I think we are ready to start our third IBB negotiations meeting for a negotiated agreement for the upcoming 23-24 school year. I'll let Stephanie take it from here.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you. So tonight, we're going to hopefully complete NEA-Shawnee Mission Issue Statement Number 9, ensuring that NEA-Shawnee Mission can communicate regarding the negotiated agreement with new hires. So I did share the notes on the screen. The frame and focus that we did was really talking about really what's happening now more than anything. So that's up on the screen right now if folks want to sort of take a glance at that. And then when we got to interest, we spent some time talking about really the no-brainer is it makes representation more efficient if new hires know their obligation and rights under the master agreement. You all talked about an interest is helping teachers, providing more support. The master agreement really does outline a lot of things that a teacher really gains support and success through. Talked about better chance of compliance with the agreement, less grievances or disagreements about the agreement if everyone knows it. Talked about the association said we'd like for them to know about their option for membership, which is part of the master agreement, in compliance with the law, because it creates more effective leaders and makes the association more viable. And the district's interest was making sure that while that is an association interest, the district has an interest in not engaging in any activity that could be unlawful or that would violate the Negotiated Agreement Act. And then we said it supports the IBB process. The more folks that know about the negotiated agreement and what goes on here and how it gets bargained for, the more successful you all are with support for the process. So those were the interests you identified. There may be more now that folks have slept on this for a few days. If so, we can drop them in there if you think of them.
Maybe it might be frame and focus, but it talked about how we hosted a breakfast, and we did do that last year. And then in other years, we might have had a lunch or maybe not. I think the frame and focus might be that each year we, as an association, come to the district or the superintendent and request to be like part of the agenda, whether it's a breakfast or an optional lunch or an optional breakfast, either way. So like each year we're just asking about it and trying to find out if we can have a time on the schedule of the new teacher academy.
So are you saying that second bullet point under frame and focus that the NEA usually hosts a breakfast or a social hour, that it's dependent upon request or it's different every year?
I guess I feel like I usually have to reach out to them just to say, we would like to do this again. Is there a time? We do have other events that are not dependent on the district that we do after they are finished with their contract day during those 3 days.
Okay. Would you like me to capture anything else in a
No,
bullet point
that's
up
it.
there? Okay. When you framed and focused, you talked about the district does hand out the master agreement
Yes.
and does give information to the NEA, including email addresses.
Yep.
Outside of allotted time at New Academy is difficult and not effective. I'm not sure what that was about.
I think maybe that was actually capturing when I was meeting with Dr. Gilhouse and Dr. Hubbard about last spring, and we came to a good kind of idea of trying to do individual lunches at each building during New Teacher
Okay.
Academy. And I think once I thought more about it over the summer, I realized that it was going to be difficult to try to do that at so many different sites and get the building reps there as well. But I think we also did, as we discussed this, we wouldn't want that to be a mandatory thing anyway, that a new hire would have to attend a lunch in their building with the building rep. So
we talked about building rep has time to meet with new teachers, but it seemed as though it wasn't maybe what you all had thought or pictured it to be last year when you tried it. but it's still on the list.
Yeah,
as
I didn't end up
perhaps-
trying to do 40, or, lunches at each individual building yet. I didn't think that I'd be able to accomplish that.
So we need to think about feasibility, how it looks different if you were to do that. We talked about HR boot camp is where you educate administrators. NEA hosts a couple of information sessions, not necessarily highly attended. And then I did put under frame and focus what day 1, 2, and 3 looks like in the academy.
Okay.
Down under solutions, I don't know, we were kind of getting towards the end, and lots of things were bouncing around. I'm not sure if I captured these right. One idea was a joint communication done by the NEA and the district, maybe through voluntary information sessions hosted by HR and NEA, or could it be just written common bullet points to share over lunch at individual buildings or a common building or meeting? Maybe that goes back to making sure that really is feasible. And then just separate from that, I had make lunch plans from last year real, and then there was an emphasis on making sure that attendance is optional. Another idea, and it may be similar to the common bullet points, is a joint cheat sheet of the negotiated agreement and then multiple ways to access it. And then I said, keep doing what we're currently doing. That was because some of these things up here are good things.
Right.
Right? That happen, some things that happen. So those were the solutions that came out of the end of the last conversation. We said, let's kind of let it sit and see what else comes up.
Was there ever talk, or, I was trying to remember from last time, about that first one, something that we jointly agree on, things that we will share with our new hires that we all think are important, that may or may not does it have to be a voluntary session if it's something that is in our agreement that we both agree needs to be explicitly told to the new hires?
I would defer that to Schumacher,
Okay.
just to see how that fits in, because I don't think it's fair for me to infringe upon those first 3 or 4 days, because I
That
know
are
how hard
his.
you work on it. So
Yeah.
does that fit for you or not?
Yeah, I mean, it could. I think what you're talking about, though, is like when we make the offer of contract,
Oh,
or,
I wasn't necessarily thinking of making
Okay.
them, I was actually thinking of like during NTA, but I know that there's a lot of things going on during that time, so.
see, I kind of think that that's not really the time to get into the weeds with the P&A,
Okay,
but, I mean, I think they're more interested on how to set up their classroom and how they're going to be mentored and what curriculum and resources am I going to have, things like that.
right,
So to me, if we do some joint informational sessions, it would be after
Later.
NTA, right?
okay,
But I was thinking that we could have a conversation about what we want to emphasize when we're doing onboarding, because we do cover some
Yeah.
P&A pieces during onboarding.
okay,
If you feel like, I don't know, guarded lunchtime and plan time, if those are pieces that we want to
Sure.
emphasize, that's
Or even
something that we
block
don't.
out.
I mean, that clearly can be something we can throw into
Okay.
onboarding.
yeah. Blackout days, I sometimes think
Blackout
about that.
days, right?
Or even just the difference between a personal day or a sick day, or how that all,
Yep. And we
Works.
cover a lot of that, but
sure you do.
maybe not in the detail that is applicable to your professional employees or our professional employees.
yeah.
And how onboarding is different than NTA in what way?
Yeah, so if I offer Christy a teaching job, I offer her the physical contract, and then I give her a copy of the P&A. Make sure you take a look at this as well. This is part of your contract. And then HR hosts these onboarding sessions throughout the summer to get their badge, to get their devices, to get all of those kind of technical things. And during that time, we cover leave, we cover other kind of high leverage points of the P&A. It's about an hour-and-a-half session. So that's kind of nuts and bolts is what I'd call it. And then NTA is more, hey, big celebration, welcome to the district. This
Okay,
is,
gotcha.
you know.
What are your thoughts on during onboarding, besides having your contact info if they needed to ask a question, having mine? I don't know. I'm just, I guess.
It's a question about. If it is a question specifically about the P&A, right? So we want to make sure for benefits, right? Or they need to access FML, or
then
the
that
things
should
that
go
human
HR.
resources facilitates are are processes within human resources. So I don't know what that looks like that you give to them.
Yeah, I'd have to refresh. I mean, we've got a PowerPoint presentation that we go through and we tweak each year. I haven't looked at it in detail recently.
Sure.
I
But
mean,
that could be something, I guess, we discuss with that solution,
Yeah.
right? I mean, that would be
Yeah.
after it wouldn't have to be
I mean, if I'm a
today.
new employee, there is no way I'm reading the P&A, right? Like, but
Right.
if I was given a one-page, make sure you read this section, and this section, and
like
for
that.
questions about the P&A, here's your NEA president, or you can contact your building rep, and here is, human resources contact.
We've done that for years with just regular staff at the start of the year. Make sure that it's required that you look at this, 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 and this. I mean, a handful of items each year, so that may be a possible
Maybe even
option.
at the bottom, developed by, jointly by NEA District Administration and Shawnee Mission NEA.
Yeah.
Like that?
I mean, I personally would really like to include number 2, but make it so that, like Rachel was talking about, if it's optional, it needs to be a day when they have their car there, so that they could
Right.
leave. I know that there were some, when you had the third day lunch, they could go and get a food truck or something, and I know that that can present timing issues, making sure you get through the whole line to eat,
Yes.
making sure you get back to your session. I'd heard from a few people that were presenters that that third day was difficult to get back to their session on time and get all their food, and so that might be something to consider. If it's still optional, they could take the lunch without even staying there to eat. Or not take the lunch. They don't have, it would literally be, yeah.
That day was time with their mentor, wasn't it?
So there was a day when they were all at South, because that was the
Right.
day we had the breakfast prior to their sessions.
Jill, when you're talking about making lunch plans, number 2, is that in buildings or part of the NTA?
Part of the NTA. An optional part of the NTA.
Right. So I know we had that discussion last year, and our solution was to throw out the breakfast, the
Correct.
voluntary breakfast. And the reason why we talked about it is we had those lunch times already scheduled for,
Right.
like, meeting with your mentor. And then I think the other one was meeting with the building.
Oh, I see what you're
principal.
saying. You're
And so-
saying, okay,
We'd already allocated those times for
got it.
other needs from our perspective. So I do like the idea, Jill, of memorializing that the district would build in a breakfast, a voluntary breakfast during NTA. I don't know
Okay.
if that's satisfying or.
I mean, I get that you guys, I get that,
I
I
think
get
that,
that you guys don't want to put resources into something that might not be well attended. So, I mean, I think there's a
Right.
concern of, again, we need NTA, as I understand, is like super tightly packed. There's a lot that has to be done. And so I don't know if a breakfast or like a coffee and cookie afterward, like,
Right.
know.
I think one of the issues with the timing of the breakfast last year was that it was like 7 to 8, and then they started at 8. And so if it's, the third day and you've had 2 full days, you might think, oh, I'll sleep in a little bit and just come right at 8. And then there were some staff, the new staff, that said, oh, gosh, I didn't realize I was going to maybe get to get some more information from the association during this time. So, I mean, I think
So
that
what
maybe
if
the
we
timing of it,
What if we pushed the schedule back to have the start time align with what it would typically be with a
I mean,
voluntary
right.
breakfast?
I mean, I think that would be something that definitely we could try, yeah, yeah.
I get it. Okay, so we're not changing our schedule, just you have to take whatever's left. Rather than doing that, we adjust the schedule so that
Right.
they would still be reporting at the same time if they chose to.
Right,
If they didn't have to.
okay,
It's almost like we have a late start one day.
Yeah,
So like
yeah.
the start time is 8 o'clock all day, but district activities don't start until 9 on the third day.
Yeah. I was thinking a half hour, but yeah,
Yeah,
something.
depends how big of a breakfast you're talking.
right.
Would people need to say, so you'll know how many to
Yes,
expect?
and we would ask if they could please RSVP, but we would always, whatever leftovers we had, we'll have a table, and last time we just took all the leftovers to the table, and people stopped by and got things afterwards.
So
between-
when this says keep doing what you're currently doing, is that the tabling and what does get handed out, or what all is the keep doing what you're currently doing? Is
I'm-
some of-
They're currently, the onboarding part where you're highlighting things in the agreement, but tweak it, I think, like maybe discuss exactly what we'd like to highlight during onboarding. Our association is having twice in the fall sessions after school that go over like the top 10, might be more like top 20, things in your agreement, rights and obligations. We do that twice in the fall.
You're still sharing information, email addresses?
Right, I was
Yeah.
more looking at this as this, solving the issue of making sure that they know of their obligations and their rights in the P&A. So I was trying to think of things that we're doing that, well, yeah, I guess, yeah, sharing emails, and that's actually in our agreement.
Okay.
So that happens anyway.
Just going to cut and copy this to the end, because that's not a solution here, okay?
And the tabling just means like having a table and we put our, you know,
Yeah.
table skirt on there and,
Yeah, just clarifying this isn't
Tablecloth.
really replacing that. So in terms of what's new here would be, if you're thinking about breakfast, one day of the NTA with optional attendance, kind of like a late start, would you not be doing then lunch one day? Would that come off as an idea, or is that still, the lunch would be more like this up here, the common points being shared over lunch?
right, they're not going to be able to do both.
Okay, so then it sounds like you're leaning towards a breakfast idea in terms of the schedule, Mike.
Yeah,
Should
I
I-
think the district would keep those lunches as times for us to use for our programming.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and strike that then. So you all would need to figure out the details of that, Jill
Right.
and Mike.
The breakfast?
For the time, I would obviously plan the breakfast. I think we meant.
No, but I mean, what day of the 3
Oh,
days and all
yeah.
that?
Yeah.
I do like the idea of what we call a cheat sheet and multiple ways to access it, but that could also be something that we use for onboarding, but just make sure it's, like, we would have it posted on our website, and I'm sure you guys could give it to principals.
Is 4 and
or-
5 kind of the same when you talk about a cheat sheet? Is that what Rachel was saying? Like, could it be a document saying, here are some key things in your contract, where to find them? Is that what you were thinking cheat sheet would be?
Yeah,
So we could do it a couple ways. It could be, I'm thinking about like our salary schedule informational page that we did when we worked on the schedule, right? That's
Right.
just like, we have this, it's an agreed upon document, and maybe we put it on that same web page that has all of the agreements. We could also like have a summary document at the front of the P&A that is part of the P&A. I throw that out there because it might not get as lost that way.
You mean actually printed in the document?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, we could literally have, and it could be easily pulled out, right? It could be easily pulled out and separated out. But if it is, 1 or 2 pages at the front of the P&A document that's like summary, then we know we both agree to it, and we probably assure that it's going to be kept updated
right.
because it's part of the document versus hopefully we're all retired like 10 years from now and other people are sitting here. I know, I ain't got more time than that, but, and then all that work we do is just lost, right?
So it's
And
not
then
like
working
repeating
from
your table of
scratch.
contents. It's not just because you have a table of contents.
Yeah, I mean, we could add table of contents, and the first thing could be summary of agreement, and then,
Well, is it a summary of agreement or where to find
Points.
Or-
where to find key points?
yeah, it could be whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, whatever we think is the quickest way. Like, what are the top 10 questions that how much leave do I have? FAQ, yeah, like,
Oh, that's all right.
and then it could be like an FAQ, and then at the back of it, it could, like, what is my protected plan time? Statement of it, and then a reference. We could even be real fancy and have a clickable link.
Yes, please. I'm just kidding.
So-
Yes, I agree. I do like that if it's part of the current P&A. Yeah.
And also, when you guys are sharing the email addresses with us, would it be possible for you just to mention that someone from NEA-Shawnee Mission would be reaching out to them? Just because I think they think that we're like bots or like strangers or that we're not with the district. And would there be any way to just say that you would be receiving an email from an employee in Shawnee Mission? You don't even have to say it's from NEA-Shawnee Mission. They don't, I mean, once they know we're an employee, they can, we just want them to understand that we're employees, that we're not a stranger reaching out to them.
You can certainly put that on the bullet. I mean, I think you send 4 or 5 throughout the year. I mean, I fill those requests 4 or 5 times a year. I think if you wanted to add that to the sheet, that the NEA-Shawnee Mission will be reaching out to you 4 or 5 times a year.
But do they know that their emails are, because like my understanding is that like when Dr. Atha did this, which do you do it now? He just goes to IT and he's like, give me a spreadsheet.
I go to HR, Melissa Brumbaugh, and she creates the spreadsheet. Jill sends me exactly what she wants. I talk to Melissa Brumbaugh. Melissa sends me the information with all of the members on there. Sometimes they're listed twice, but we try to designate that for you and let you know.
I think maybe what you're talking about, Amber, is in the summertime after they've been hired, we will reach out to them to welcome them and invite them if they'd like to just an event, you know, after the first or second or third day of NTA.
Is it going to their, because I assume that comes from your NEA email address, or does it coming from your, because I'm wondering if it goes to their regular email?
It does. Do you send a hard copy letter as well, because you get their
Yep,
home
we do
address?
send a hard copy letter.
So you get
Sometimes,
that.
unfortunately, it's their parents' address because they might still be living with them.
But
Or
that
an
may be an
old email.
opportunity there, Jill, either in the hard copy and the first email, to say that you'll get 3 or 4 of these throughout the year. That might be an opportunity to share that information.
I don't know how we, I'm trying to think of a way, I don't know how we,
Yeah.
communicate that.
I know it seems small, but I guess I'm still, we're getting closer and closer to that endorsement or that, I don't know.
Encouragement. Because I think it was, you're saying encouraging or discouraging.
Yeah.
Right. Like even saying, look at these emails, read these emails
Right.
is a little awkward for the district to do. I think we can certainly make sure they're not going to junk, that they're receiving them, that it's not going in there. I know I have like 2 separate focused and other now. This is going to their focused. We can make sure it's going to the right place.
Right.
Yeah. I think there might just always, I mean, there might just be people that are always going to be weary of that, but I can understand. You know, when, I mean, if you were to email them from your school district email, then it would be from your school district email, so they would know you're an employee.
Would we be able to send that communication through our school district email? Would that be something?
Yep.
Okay.
There's no prohibition on that I'm aware of.
So that might help too, if we reach
Yeah.
out
If
via,
they see that it's like an ad
At
SMSD
SMSD instead, 'cause
before
I
they
think-
figure out the association and.
when I did those, I did it from my personal. And so that would help too, if I knew I could do it from my SMSD.
A lot of people don't check their personal very much,
Well, that's true.
once you're working
Yeah.
a lot, yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Anything else that needs to be hashed out in the solutions or come off?
The first one might be similar to the fourth one. Although,
Well, the fourth one, I think, is
oh, you're right, it's
is
the first one's like a session.
either document and a web link, web
So
links.
I would foresee potentially whatever if we go with a solution that includes putting something at the front of the P&A, that could be what could be handed out with like contact information on the bottom, because that contact information will change from time to time.
Okay.
Do
And
we actually
what-
give them like a full printed copy, Dr. Schumacher? Like we hand them the 50-page?
No, we send them the link.
Yeah, I was going to say,
Like-
I don't think I've printed a negotiated agreement in 10 years.
But that,
So
I
you don't
mean,
have-
that
you
is
don't have, like,
something that
little
would be.
folded booklets in
Don't
our
you get like a
contracts?
little blue folder when you start? I'm trying to remember my
You
first
could
day.
print it, we
Yep.
just haven't spent our,
We don't do the P&A, but there's
Association money
a
on
few
that.
documents, yes.
So that could potentially go in the
Like
blue
a
folder
one-pager?
if it was like a 1 or 2 pager with contact information at the bottom.
yeah. Both
So in
the
the bulk-
district's website and our website have a spot on the website where there's a link to the P&A. Which makes things easier to find too, because if you hit Command F and then
Yes.
type in what you're looking for, it can be easier than flipping through like a paper version of the agreement. Anyway.
So this joint cheat sheet we're talking about would be on the district's webpage and the NEA page where the contract currently exists, but it would now also have a cheat sheet and then perhaps links to those sections. And then also insert a page in the front of the P&A or blue folder with the same info. Is that right? That gets given out by the district. At what point does that go out? Is
That
part
was
of
like when I came in to get my badge or something, I think I got.
That's the onboarding meeting I was talking about.
But I would be more than happy if we wanted to do, voluntary sessions between, like, number one, HR and NEA, if we were able to find, days and times to do that, not during, because you were saying it's jam-packed, those days, yeah, those,
So
first
number
days and
5,
service
decide what
days.
needs to be covered during onboarding. What is that list? That was the conversation on covered as in saying you should read these sections. Is that what's happening here under B, under the joint cheat sheet? So insert the
Yes.
page in the blue folder and then, so number 5 really is duplication, is that correct?
Yes.
You all do need to decide though what is on the list, right, of key items. And I'm going to take 5 off because it's really B under 4. I'm sorry, Jill. I jumped in to make sure I had that right before I deleted, and you were on joint communication. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying, I would be more than happy to work with something as far as an information session hosted by HR and NEA. We do those just as, NEA puts them on, but I'd be happy to partner with those two if you wanted more things to do.
Glad to.
Well, when would those
If
be,
you
and would
wanted
those?
more nights, no.
Sure.
When would those be, and would those be optional?
They'd be
Yeah.
You're talking they're
optional.
being sessions.
They would be optional.
Would they be like virtual? Would they be?
Virtual would be
Probably help with
easier.
attendance, yeah,
It would definitely help the attendance, yeah.
or potential attendance. Yeah, maybe, we at least try one and see what kind of attendance we get. And
Would your thing to be cover that sheet, or would?
maybe.
Yeah.
'Cause beyond
But also,
that
we just
sheet, I don't
probably
know
open it up for questions. If people are like, hey, I ran into this issue and I wanted to know what my rights and obligations were around it.
And then you all, if you're going to jointly host it, would know ahead of time what topic you field versus what topic the district would field to honor that interest under not engaging in certain kind of activity.
Correct.
When would these be?
I think you'd want to give it a little bit of time into the school year, like
Yeah.
maybe starting in mid-September, late September, where they got their feet wet, after school. Virtually, I like that idea. You get better attendance. And I think it's another example of the district's and the association's commitment to work with each other.
Yeah.
It's a visible representation of that.
It could even be some of the things that we've added or changed, or even collective commitments that we did during this
Yeah.
time of IBB.
Well, you do a presentation of the changes during your ratification meetings, or do your ratification?
Yeah,
meetings?
we usually just have one, over the last few years, we've just had one large meeting where anyone could come and we would go over the changes and they would have questions.
So I'm going to say
For
voluntary
ratification.
information session hosted by HR and NEA, honor the interest regarding district not encouraging membership, possible virtual perhaps, and then, maybe a couple months into the school year. And then in terms of topics, may just be maybe the cheat sheet, it may be newly negotiated items. Or just Q&A, open Q&A.
I think all those things.
Yeah.
think it's important to cover any changes that are going to be different than the contract in the past, like this year with the Super Bowl, like that was a big thing that kind of came up, like to start planning for those things in advance would be great.
Yeah.
What about this common points to share over lunch at individual buildings or in common buildings / meetings? Maybe I put meetings myself and you didn't mean that. I just didn't know what common buildings were. If there wasn't something common happening.
I meant when all the new hires are in one location. I think that is something to cross off because we're going to have possible information session, optional information sessions, the
And then making
cheat
it to every
sheet.
building was not a feasible plan.
It makes it a bit difficult. It's a rather large district.
It's going once, going
And if
twice.
there are things that
Take it
our
out.
association believes our building reps need to share with the members in their building, specifically members in their building, we will cover that during our building rep
Right,
meetings.
right,
so,
got you, okay.
Yeah.
So it sounds like there's some traction or perhaps some tentative agreement around this idea of joint communication at voluntary info sessions, jointly hosted, with a little bit of the format listed here. Sounds like there's some traction around designated a breakfast one day of the NTA with optional attendance. Sounds like there's some tentative agreement around a cheat sheet to be determined what all's on that, to be shared electronically and paper-wise in onboarding. And then to continue to do what you're doing is the tabling, the sessions NEA holds and the meetings you hold outside of anything with the district. And then the sharing of emails and giving NEA contact information to new hires would continue to happen. How would you guys, at some point we want to do thumbs. I want to see if there's anything else, though, that's coming up as solutions. And then do you want to thumb this without all the details filled in, and then people just take responsibility for filling these details in? Or is this something that has to be in a document, an MOU, contract? What do you guys think about that?
I mean, I would think if we're doing any P&A language, that needs to be a TA that I will happily voluntarily, I'll need a little while to put it together. Like, I think I
Absolutely.
would have to work in the background, do first draft, send it to Jill. Jill will give feedback, send back. But certainly, in an upcoming meeting, once we feel like it's in a good spot, we could present it, and then that would have to be a TA. I don't know that these other things are contractual. I would probably see them as being a collective commitment on the other components. So it's,
Yeah, I would hope that we'd be able to, in future years, continue with the breakfast, with optional attendance.
That was my thinking, that this memorializes our agreement, that the district will build that in to the NTA.
Okay.
To me, I mean, Rachel needs to chime in, but it doesn't need to be in the P&A, it's just a collective commitment.
well, and we want to have some flexibility, right? So let's say next year you're like, actually, we want to do a coffee afterward, or actually, I mean, I don't think it's a contractual thing that we want in there, but I think having a collective commitment that we both sign, that this is our methodology that we're using to educate our new hires and our current professional employees would be good.
And basically educating them about the contents of the P&A.
Which is primarily rights, but also some obligations. I think the biggest things are just, the nitty gritty. Like, I mean, you don't realize, I'm sure you guys do because you work with new hires, but every once in a while I get asked to like speak at a undergraduate class of people getting their teacher degree, and the questions they ask me, I'm like, holy cow, like, they just don't have an orientation to the professional world at all, right? I mean, and
That is a really nice way of saying it. If only we were all so young and
yeah.
I'd take it.
That's not nice. I didn't mean that.
Yeah, I mean, some of the lucky ones have never even had like real jobs, right? Like, never had to, so, yeah.
Right.
A lot of job contracts aren't
Right,
this expensive.
right.
Yeah, for sure. So generally, I do red highlight when it's somewhere. I put the day you reach TA on this, and I send it back out to Rachel, Jill, and I'm going to copy Jonathan. Are you guys comfortable with doing thumbs on this? Do you want to think a little bit more about additional solutions? Or do you want to fill in more
Can you like
detail?
summarize the components that we're talking about, just so I make sure, yeah. I know exactly what we're talking about as possible solution.
So-
Yeah, I think the first one up there is the possibility of HR and NEA working together to have a voluntary information session.
Should I say host? Is that clearer? Instead of joint communication, sounds like it could be a document, which is further down. If I say host joint communication or host session,
Yeah.
would that be a little clearer?
Yes.
Because that's really what you're talking about. Okay, so host, joint hosting of a session, info session?
Yes. And I actually did briefly speak to, I think, Dr. Higgins about this last summer. We talked about even trying to do a podcast at one point when we both thought we would have time, which we didn't. But anyway, I mean, something like that even, so.
So that's number one. Jill, I got my notes up. You tell me if it's
Yeah.
clear as you sort of summarize.
Having a breakfast during one of the days of NTA within the, timeframe with an optional breakfast.
And so within time frame means, the regular start time.
Correct.
So the district kind of does a late start of
Like a late
district
start,
topics.
yep.
Correct.
Okay, so people don't have to actually come in an hour early to do it. That's nice. Okay, so regular start time.
And then, Rachel, we talked about the third part there.
Okay, so adding a, what do we want to call it? An FAQ, because I like the FAQ idea, adding a FAQ or summary to the front of the P&A.
I have given out at onboarding, reference the blue folder.
Uh-huh.
And then I also put, district webpage and NEA page and perhaps adding links.
And including that summary along with contact information for HR and NEASM in the onboarding folder. Okay.
And then the bottom, I don't think is anything new, Rachel, but I'm going to scroll up to it. That's just the tabling, the NEA
Yes.
sessions they hold, and the sharing of emails.
Yeah, so that's three different things, right? Three different components that we're talking about. And I think if we have a consensus on those, I can put together a collective commitment for us to sign, and then if you just give me some time
Absolutely, yeah.
to work on a summary, I might even like shoot you an email, Jill, and say just like hammer out what are the things and ask Dr. Schumacher what, I mean, I think I have an idea, but I
Yeah.
don't live and breathe it every day.
Sure.
And then it would be a joint commitment? Or
That
what-
would be a TA. We'd have to do a TA for anything that goes in the P&A.
Okay. Okay.
Right.
Do folks feel like we want to do thumbs on this? Or is there more solutions to explore in an area we haven't?
Feel good?
Yeah, thumbs all three at the same time then? Yep. We have consensus? Okay. I'm just going to do my usual in red, make this a TA, and then send it over to you and Jill, so you've got just this document.
Yeah.
And today is 2/21?
Yes.
And then, Rachel, you're going to be prepared here in a moment when I close and email this. I don't know if you want to screen share your issue statement regarding late resignations. And if people need a 1 to 2 minute break, or if we want?
I did not get a bathroom break before this, so we
Okay.
could do a quick bathroom
Yeah, it's
break.
4:10, let's start back at 4:15.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We're good to go.
All right. Do you all want to share? I'm not sure who's on.
Do you mind screen sharing so that I can like keep working on this?
So Clayton, should I unplug? Just unplug and for them to screen share? You want to just? Okay, excellent, thank you.
You teeing this up, Rachel, am I?
I'm so tired. Okay. Okay, I could just start by, this is an issue that this team has discussed before. It's our late resignation provision. So in terms of where we are coming from, our late resignation provision 3 years ago essentially said that you would be released from your contract upon payment of $1,000. And our experience is that that was unique in our geographic area, that most school districts didn't have as permissive of a release provision. And the reason we raised it as a problem was the same reasons that we are still raising this issue, is that when a teacher late resigns, which means that after they have committed to work for the upcoming school year, sign a contract, no, not necessarily sign their current contract, but they've committed to come back, and I can't remember what the date is, May, June?
It changes, it's the second Friday after
The
the,
third Friday in May.
right, thank you.
Is that in the P and A and the
No,
teacher's
it's
contract?
Statute.
It's by state statute.
Oh, state statute, okay.
And if we really, really want to go back in time, like, why this even exists, why teachers sign contracts when in other employment in other industries you don't have employment contracts, is because schools need teachers to commit to a school year. And if they were permitted to just jump school districts, all of our school districts would just be constantly competing with each other, right? It would be a disaster. And so, at least the states I've worked in all have these provisions that say, okay, once you're committed, you're committed. And it's not just about not allowing teachers to jump, but also to not allow school districts to compete with each other, right? And try and incentivize, okay, come over here mid-school year, come over here mid-school year. And then, of course, at the same time, because it's an employment contract, a school district is also committed to keep you employed absent very specific reasons and process as afforded under the negotiated agreement. And so we raised this issue a couple years ago, and we essentially came up with a solution that sort of dipped our toe in the water of suitable replacement. It is not uncommon. You will hear from all school districts that what they really want is, let us find somebody to fill your shoes before you leave. Because if there's no one qualified to fill your shoes, primarily your students are going to suffer, right? I think really in any position, I know having elementary school students, if my elementary school, if one of my kids' teachers said they were leaving mid-school year, that would be really traumatic, I think. It would be really difficult. And then also on that teacher's team, it's really difficult on their team because they have to sort of pick up the pieces. If you have a substitute coming in who needs help or assistance, a lot of weight falls on your coworkers. And then, of course, HR's big hiring work that they do is really one time a year, and it's a big burden on HR when they have to be constantly hiring and constantly looking throughout the school year. It's a big challenge, and in Shawnee Mission, we have a really lean human resources staff. As compared, again, to other school districts in our geographic area. They really fill their 40 to 50 to 60 hours a week that they work. And so when they're trying to find someone, particularly in a difficult to fill position in the middle of the school year, it's a big burden. And so where we are now in Shawnee Mission is we have revised our P&A, and it's not time limited in any way. We don't have a pilot program or anything like that, but the way our P&A exists right now, and I think I can say this now because I've explained it to different teachers so many different times, is that you essentially have an option of giving a 2-week or a 10 contract day notice and paying liquidated damages of $2,000 and being released from your contract. So I mentioned $1,000 earlier. We did increase that because it had not been increased for years. And when we looked at what a typical amount in a liquidated damages provision is for other school districts, it was closer to or around that amount. So we increased it. Again, that amount, liquidated damages, is a legal term. It is not intended to compensate the school district for any monetary loss or monetary damages. That term is used when it is difficult to determine the damages. So that's not because HR determined it cost them $2,000 worth of person power to hire someone new or anything like that. It's just, hey, it'd be really difficult to figure out a monetary amount for these damages, and so we're going to pre-agree that it's $2,000. And so we have that as an option, and then we also have been trying, because this is new, an option where you, without paying liquidated damages, by giving 28 calendar days advance notice, may resign. And if we do not have a suitable replacement at the end of that time period, you may still resign. And so I will just share off the top of my head some problems that I've seen in trying to work with our current provision that we'd like to try and solve here. One is just complicated. Like, we just have a lot of times people who are confused about what to do. And they're just like, what I have to pick from these options, and how do I count the days, and what does this mean? So it's a bit complicated. And two, the 28 calendar days has resulted in some really unfortunate things, like I'm gonna resign in June and never even have to work a contract day. So HR's done all this work to hire you, and your 28 days runs out before you're even in the classroom. Or I'm going to resign right before fall break or right before winter break, or I'm just going to resign before break and then use all my days. So unfortunately, it's resulted in what I would call kind of like playing the system to that person's benefit and to the school district's detriment. And I'll let...
Along those same lines, the 10 days notice, not everyone has done this, but there's been at least a few instances in which they have, where you can get out if you give 10 days and the $2,000. We used to see people just walking away. We're seeing that again because you have 10 leave days, right? And so people will take 10 personal days or illness days or whatever and effectively not return after they give that notice on day one, pay their $2,000, and they're out. So Rachel did a really nice job of teeing this up. I'll just add on a couple different things. I think our interests really kind of explain it. I was thinking about how I was going to frame this up myself, and inevitably I'm going to sound like a cranky old man saying, get off my yard. But I do think things have changed for human resource departments across all industries, not just school systems. I think the workforce is different. I think there's... you know, at least when I was hired, you know, there was this commitment to your organization. There was a commitment to the person that you work for. And I think there is that to some extent, but I don't think it's at the level in which it used to be. That's my only assessment, because we did put in some things 2 years ago that should have been more restrictive, and we're getting more of these right now. And my only explanation is that, and it's not just younger people, it's across our entire workforce, where it's what's best for me right now, and there's not as much of a commitment towards, you know, my employer, my organization. And so I think, and this is sounding like get off my yard kind of stuff, that when, certainly there's some legit reasons why people have resigned, certainly. But I think if we look at them with a critical eye or with a realistic eye, a lot of it is what's best for that particular employee, not what's best for the kids in that classroom, not what's best for the school or what's best for the organization. So I think we need to really frame up the idea that we all know this, that we're in this for kids. our job is to teach kids and make sure we're doing what's best for kids. And having 34 late resignations to this point is not what's best for kids. You know, they're leaving their kids, they're leaving their kids in the lurch. So that's as simple as I can put it.
To add to the crankiness, I will, just in terms of what happens if someone does not comply, again, it creates a huge administrative burden again. So again, this is a personal interest, but it adds to just my job responsibilities basically, because we have had several instances where a professional employee has made the decision that they're going to walk away and not comply with the provision, right? And then I have to, if they are a teacher, file an action with the state if they don't give that 10-day notice to try and get revocation of their license, which is a huge petition that has to be prepared, has to be filed, takes a lot of time. If they do serve the 10 days, but then they fail to pay the $2,000, basically, you can't file a lawsuit to try and recover $2,000. That would never make financial sense. And so we turn them over to collections and probably collect like none of that, right? Like minimal are we able to collect. So it doesn't, again, that doesn't do anything to help those staff members who are left to support that classroom or support that class, and does nothing to help those students.
Yeah.
So that's been an issue too. It's like, well, who is this helping when they don't, okay, so now they don't care about their license anyway. Like they've walked away. So I've spent all this time going after and filing this petition for their license to get disciplined through the end of the school year. And they have that on their record, but I don't know how it meets the interest when I do that.
The only thing that matters to us is that we have the best teacher in the classroom with those kids. And so going after $2,000 or going for their license means nothing to those kids in that classroom, right? This piece here, I think, is super important. When we're not operating under the same rules as our neighboring school districts, all the recruiting that we've done to hire someone goes out the window when they can hire that person out from underneath us in the summer months, past that statutory date. So that's what makes it really difficult in this era of teacher shortages, when we know that there's a hard time finding quality teachers anyway.
I was going to ask, and this is probably information we're going to ask to get at some point, the contracts or the liquidated damages clauses in other districts, if they have them, and what their say, and are there districts that can, or where someone could pay the liquidated damages over the summer and not come back?
You mean in our geographic area? Like
Yes.
we want to look, so we want to, in terms of data we would want to look at what are the late resignation provisions within some defined geographic area, and what do they say? I guess we'd have to decide if it makes sense to cross state lines or not.
Yeah, and we did put together,
Oh, thanks, John.
and a couple years ago, we did do that subcommittee where we started to pull some of that. So I think we have
Right.
some of that initial work from a couple years ago, because we did look at least some of our neighboring school districts as to their
Yeah, and
policies.
I have access to, those as well, or I can get them, I guess most of us could get them from their websites and whatnot, because aren't the agreements public? But I think I can also get them from working with my colleagues in the other districts that are presidents as well. Another piece I would want to know, and I believe you have some data on it already, when they give their reason for leaving, comparing those and looking at those, how many of them are part of the group of reasons that that the district will say, that's I don't know what the word is.
Legitimate.
Well,
legit-
no, we have
yeah.
a list. So again, just more orientation to this. As a team,
Thank
we
you.
said, okay, we're not, obviously we can't unreasonably handcuff someone to a position. And so we have those enumerated lists of reasons that would make you eligible for release from your contract without any payment of liquidated damages or finding a suitable replacement. And so those were things like move of if a spouse had to move for their position. I can't remember the other one.
Once they got a raise,
A
position.
Promotion to an
Promotion.
administrative position.
In the district.
And of course, also, obviously, we have employees all the time that have health reasons that they cannot work. And again, I just want to emphasize that there are processes available, and that's never an issue. If you need an accommodation, including leave from your job or release from your contract, is in some extreme cases the only solution because someone's physically unable to work. Obviously, they work through their protections under the P&A and under applicable federal and state laws. If there is a medical issue at play, be it a physical issue or a mental health issue. Or if they have an immediate family member, obviously that would come under FML as well.
Right, yeah. And I know that you guys, or you have been keeping track of those, so I think that would be a great piece of information, set of data that we can,
It's probably my pretty small number,
Look
a
at.
pretty small percentage, I would guess.
Of those, yeah, very small. But yeah, we can get that detailed information.
is it part of the document you've already put in the,
It might be in there. So
Okay.
I did put into our team drive our stats from the last several years. Before I put it up there, let's make sure everyone's comfortable with the data. I'm going to stop sharing.
yeah, no problem, I understand.
I'm sure it's redacted.
It is, but I just want, we had just some discussions about how redacted it needed to be.
Okay.
So the first sheet, sheet 1, goes through 17, 18, 18, 19, 19, 20, 20, 21. And that was work that we did prior to, I think, the last revision. And then we have more detailed information on 21, 22, and 22, 23. So 22, 23, of course, is right now.
For the first sheet, would it be an acceptable assumption that if the penalty was waived, those people would have been part of the group of acceptable reasons?
That's a really good question. So
I mean, that would be a lot of data
I'd
for you
have
to
to
go back and
think
look
through
at.
that more, but I do know, so during the pandemic year or year and a half, we were waiving everything.
Right. Okay,
So that's not applicable, but I get your
Right.
question for the previous years. Let me think about that.
What change did you all do in the P&A last year or the year before? You all did something, because this came
We
forward.
kept it for I'm sorry to interrupt. We kept it for this year. So
so we changed it 2 years ago?
last year, we kind of reviewed data. Like, we brought it up as an issue statement because we felt like, particularly because we knew COVID numbers would throw us off. Let's gather more data, let's live with it for a year, let's see what our experience is. And so this has been in play, I think, 2 full
2 full years.
2 full years
This is
now.
the second year, yeah.
So last year when we raised it, it was just to review it and to sort of inform the team what we were dealing with, but we left it alone because we didn't feel like we lived with it long enough. And then after some additional experience, we wanted to raise it as an issue again this year to talk about because of the challenges I just went through.
Does the district currently do exit interviews?
We offer them, we don't force them, and
Okay.
so on the resignation retirement form, there's a QR code for them to do it electronically, and then we offer in person as well.
Okay.
We're not getting a great response rate, frankly.
Yeah, that's fair.
Not a lot. The other thing I wanted to share before I forget about it is another challenge with our current provision on liquidated damages. And honestly, on our entire late resignation provision, there's only so much that we can do, is that our professional employee group that is represented by NEA-Shawnee Mission includes non-teacher professionals. And they are governed by different licensing statutes. And so if they leave or without complying with the provision, the district has a limited ability to seek any discipline against their license. Because, for example, for nurses, that's not one of the enumerated reasons in their discipline statute that discipline can be sought against their license. And so We terminate them, right? So we don't accept your resignation if you fail to comply. But that's it. There's no ability to seek discipline against their license so that at least their future employer knows that they failed to comply with their employment contract. So it does result in different treatment of different groups. We treat everyone the same who is in the same group. We don't pick and choose. So someone fails to comply and they're terminated. I go through the steps of seeking discipline against their license, but I'm unable to do that for nurses, for social workers.
Okay. Yeah, I was just going to ask, nurses, social workers, is it also the related services like occupational therapists, physical
OT,
therapists,
yeah.
SLP as well?
No, that's under SPED.
SL
Or no, sorry, that's SLC. Sorry, SLP would be
SLP
different, my bad.
wouldn't, yeah.
I haven't come
Speech
across
language
that, but my gut, and again, I
They're
think
the
it's in the
Department of Health.
teacher licensing regs because it's a unique profession where we've all sort of agreed that we need a year-long commitment, as we do for anyone, administrators and teachers alike. But in those other professions, they don't, it's not most common for them to work in a school setting. There's
What
so many other
percentage of the
settings.
folks that are leaving are from the other professions and not teachers? About, or do you have a sense?
Without doing the math here.
By percentage, if we said our percentage of, because most of our professional employees by far are teachers.
Yes.
But, I know we've had others in the group happen, and it's frustrating too, and this is nothing we can solve in this room, but sometimes the resignations have been rather flippant, right? Like, I know I signed a contract, but I can get a job anywhere, so terminate me, do whatever you will do, turn me over to collections, I don't care. Because of the employment market right now, and that's not something this team can share, but more just a frustration.
Jonathan, reread that issue statement. We sort of, your issue statement form, Rachel, from the district didn't ask a question, and I think we kind of worked on it as a question. What did we put, Jonathan, with a little input from Mike?
How do we reduce the negative impact on late resignations on all stakeholders?
So we're approaching or problem solving the impact of late resignations. And interestingly enough, you said, do we do exit interviews, which would be how do we reduce the number of teachers resigning through maybe a root problem? But I think we kind of talked about that a few years ago on the exit interview questions, like, instead of dealing with the impact, can we reduce the number in a way like what's causing them to leave? What way do we want to approach this one? Does that make any kind of sense? Are we going to kind of approach the why are they leaving? Or are we going to approach the they're leaving and what do we need to do?
Yeah, I think that's a inevitably good question to try to find that root cause on why. So we have a group called SMSD Recruit. It's a group of teachers, administrators, and other stakeholders who are working on some retention planning. And so maybe that could be a report to this group on some of the efforts that they're going to have to retain our staff. So that work has taken place this year. We haven't put any of those action plans into action yet. But there is a concerted effort to address that.
Are there other questions for us to frame and focus? It's sort of approaching this with like high curiosity. What are the questions you want to know before we move forward and see if, are there other interests that are not listed here? And then I think if you scroll further down, there are a couple ideas already. We could move to that. But what other questions, what are you curious about this late resignation situation that you haven't asked that might shed some light or get us thinking?
No, I don't know if we have the documentation from our neighboring districts on the provisions that they've used. I think the one question that I would have is, whatever those provisions are, I want to know what's working. You know, we can put in a lot of different things and a lot of different penalties and a lot of different incentives, but if it doesn't work or make a difference, then I think that's where the rubber hits the road.
I just did a quick Google search while we were chatting, and I was able to find two of them. I was able to find Olathe's and KCK's languages on that. The rest of them just by a quick, like, Command F, looking for resignations, I couldn't find much in their contracts, or I couldn't access a couple of their contracts or find them just through the Google search.
Is the Olathe one too much to read?
No. I mean, I can read, or I could put it up on the screen if we think there's an interest right now in
Yeah.
looking at these two. I can put these up on the screen real quick.
Who else do you consider neighboring districts?
I think it would be, I mean, probably anyone in Johnson County for sure. I mean, I think Dr. Schumacher can share what his colleagues think about it. It's really interesting because I don't know if you guys reach out to your, the union leadership in other districts, what they'll say,
Yeah,
because.
we share an office.
Oh, well, that's great. It'll be interesting to hear what their feedback is. It is a little interesting to me, I'll just say as an observation that it would help to hear from you guys on, because
Yeah.
if one of your colleagues leaves, they're no longer a member, right?
Yeah.
And then everyone who's left, again, has to deal with that. And so, I think it would be interesting to me to hear what are your interests.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if one staff member is going from one district to another, yeah, I mean, well, I won't say it. There's like a joke, oh, all of the teachers from here are going here, or all the teachers from here are going here, but not necessarily, it's not a real joke, but, I mean, we've said things like that before.
For reference, what I have
Yeah.
up right now is Olathe's P&A.
And I was going to say, not just Johnson County, but maybe Wyandotte as well.
Uh-huh.
Oh, really?
Piper.
KCK moved a suitable replacement as well, I think, last year.
Okay.
KCK is the other one I found, so when we're done with this, we could just glance at KCK's.
Is this a suitable replacement provision that I'm reading?
Yeah.
It's not written that well.
Yeah, where is it?
Right? Who's the, I'm
Shall
just
not
kidding.
be released from the contract until a competent replacement has been contracted,
Or what's the best
or when
interest
it's the best interest of the district.
of the honor, or retains the right to enforce according to Kansas statute? Oh, what if they just leave,
So
quit coming to work?
So this is what happens, and again, it's this really weird teacher licensing world that you're in. If you only have, and I will say, it was an improvement to require the 10 contract days notice in addition to payment of liquidated damages. One, because that theoretically prevents you from pushing back from your desk and walking out the door and never showing up again, because we talked about like the courteous professional 2 weeks notice. But it helped us because the district previously had no ability to seek discipline against a teacher's license when all we had was liquidated damages, because the licensing board in Kansas says, well, if that's what you have, that's your remedy. Go after those damages. We're not disciplining their license. We're not getting involved. But because we have that 10 days where we had people who, and we only had it happen maybe once or twice in the past 2 years, but who just walked away and never came back, I was able to get that discipline on their license and on their record because they failed to serve the 10 days. So their ability to pay liquidated damages wasn't even triggered. Now, if they served their 2 weeks and then walked away, I could not seek, without paying damages, I could not seek discipline against their license. So
And we didn't have this happen often, and I hesitate saying it again publicly, but there were a few who took their 10 days of guaranteed leave as their 10-day
Right.
notice. So effectively, they did walk
That's
out.
none of-
right.
And so my question
And there's
was,
nothing that prevents that. Your
No.
notice can't be exclusive of.
No,
leave.
and I don't know, I've thought about that too, like what if they really are sick? Like what are,
Yeah.
what if they get COVID, right? Like what are we gonna do? We have a limited ability to question that because we have just
Yeah.
leave days in Shawnee Mission.
yeah, well, I was going to say my question about taking their 10 current leave days, is there something similar, a relation with like, when you go on maternity leave, for instance, if you haven't worked a full, if you haven't worked a full year, you will not earn all 10 of your current days until you return, and then you'll get the remainder of them. So I didn't know if that was looked into for those specific cases or not, because they weren't fulfilling their full year yet.
Yeah.
You mean perhaps if someone does late resignation?
In
they're-
September, they've only earned one
Okay.
month's worth of, or one
It must have not
day.
been those,
It's a good question.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'd have to check with payroll.
know.
And see what they did on the back end. It's a good
If they got
clarifier.
dock days
Yeah,
or,
it's a good clarifier.
because don't we, okay, so theoretically, let's say someone gets sick with like a terrible flu in September, do we allow them to borrow from their 10 days?
They do, but
Yes.
she's right. If you don't complete your contract, they're prorated by
Okay.
the number of months that you
Okay.
work.
And then when you come back from leave, they go back, the rest of them, if you, finish your contract year, the rest of them go back into your bank. Is this still Olathe?
No, this
No.
is KCK now.
Yeah.
So Olathe does not have liquidated damages?
I didn't
It wasn't on
see, I
there.
scrolled down
Okay.
too, and I'm not seeing anything.
Okay,
that
I can
shows.
check with,
Yeah.
okay.
For sure, we are unique in having this multiple option thing.
Yes.
So I would share an interest in simplifying, right?
Okay.
I think, we've got some experience with suitable replacement here, but I would definitely, I mean, all school districts that I'm aware of either go liquidated damages or suitable replacement. And so I would have an interest in simplifying and just kind of deciding what camp do we want to be in Shawnee Mission, and then what does that look like for us?
What was the other one that was being shared?
KCK.
That was KCK. I can put it back up
And
on
what
the
was the
screen.
gist of it?
It
There's-
looked like they had liquid damages,
They
but it
do.
was based on the date
It's based
that
on
the
when you decide to
resignation.
leave.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
The later you wait, the
So
more.
from statutory date to June 30th, it was 500. From July 1st to July 31st, it's 1,500. And from August 1st to the opening of the school year, it's 2,500.
Shawnee Mission's
And then
2,000.
after, it says the board
2,000.
still reserves that right to pursue any other remedies authorized by Kansas law.
Yes.
Do they have to accept a resignation in KCK, or is it automatic? Like
I mean, from what I know, just talking with other directors and presidents, if you
If they
have
can grant
liquidated
or not.
damages clause in your agreement, then that is all you need to leave.
you just pay and you go, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's my understanding too, is that there's
Well,
not a choice
But if
in
you read this, it
accepting.
says they can grant the release or not, and then liquidated damages comes into play if they grant the release.
Yeah, but I believe the PPC, the Professional Practice Commission, has said if you have liquidated damages,
You have
that
to-
will trump
have
it.
to.
Yeah.
And in
Okay,
fact,
gotcha.
actually, now I'm remembering, the reason why we raised it last year is because we had a petition in front of them that they weren't sure they were gonna act on. And I had to do a lot of briefing to convince them that because we had this 10-day and the individual had just chosen to walk away, that they should take action because the right to pay liquidated damages wasn't triggered. And that was an issue of first impression in front of the PPC, and they did decide that they would discipline that individual's license. Or they would consider it, first of all, and then I think they did end up taking discipline, so.
With the KCK, liquidated damages is only good until the beginning of the school year, and then that's no longer an option.
Yeah.
Oh,
Until the end of the
Then
year,
it's
right?
suitable replacement.
yeah.
To the opening of the new school year.
Yeah.
Rather than
And
So
just
once the
to
school
start
year
over.
begins, you can't pay liquidated damages.
so once the school year begins, if you leave in the middle of the year, then they have the right to pursue other remedies.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
So that's only if they resign in the summer,
Yes.
essentially.
Oh, wow, interesting.
And I do think we need to think, if it comes into play with whatever solution, I do think we need to think about, what are we talking here? Are we talking about I signed my contract and 2 days later I regret it? Or are we talking about we're leaving, a third grade class high and dry in the fall or the spring,
Well, so
I
what
think-
question are we focusing on? Are we gonna focus on the why are they leaving part, or are we focusing on that they're leaving, so what are we doing?
Or both.
Or both, yeah, that's fine.
I think it can be both. I mean, we're
'Cause I
feeling
just need
it.
to know where to start.
Yeah.
We're
no,
not
no.
ignoring it on either end, so.
Right.
I think it's a valid conversation for this group to have on both ends, why they're leaving and how we can prevent it. I would just say on this piece here, just to add a little context, HR directors, HR people know who has these clauses, and so we actually have a running list of who you can hire in the summer, right? So if Todd is wanting, Dr. Dane's wanting to hire someone from Blue Valley in June, we're gonna tell him, you need to look for somebody else because they're not gonna let him out.
So that's
Right.
what you're saying, Shawnee Mission looks like an easy
It is this
target.
weird competition that you have to decide where you are comfortable being in it, because we right now are at the bottom of that totem pole in the ability, like, we're getting taken in this game right now. There are, you know, a great principal can just sales pitch and get someone to come over mid-school year. So it's, yeah, because we're not competitive in this way with other districts, it's created some problems for us. And I will say, I do think that part of the solution to the issue of why, you know, why are they leaving, and a minor part, it doesn't address any like dissatisfaction with your job, but there is a fair number who don't understand that they are bound, particularly non-teacher professionals, that are just surprised to find out that they've signed a 184-day contract.
87.
And so I think.
Actually, 191 for new hire.
So is that?
Oh, yes,
No,
191.
190.
But
yeah.
I do think the education piece at least solves that small piece of the pie. Because we've had a handful that are like, oh, no, I just submitted my resignation and I don't work here anymore. Wait, you signed a contract. So,
We've got about 5 minutes, and I think that as far as the question, why are they leaving, versus what can we do once they leave, right? Can we put on the list that perhaps this group would want to hear from the SMSD recruit group that sounds like focused on that?
Are they focused on recruiting, or are they also focused on
They
retention?
said they're working on
Okay.
retention. And then, John, you maybe captured additional frame and focus, but did you start any brainstorm ideas? Because
I don't think we have any ideas yet.
did you have 2 at the bottom of your document you hadn't shared yet?
Can you pull up our issue statement again?
I don't think we had any solutions. You're asking for brainstorm
Right,
solutions?
I thought there was what were the bottom 2 bullet points on your document? I don't think they were
I didn't see
interest.
any for statement two, issue two.
I
No?
didn't either.
Okay, maybe I was looking
I
at.
don't think, but
Okay.
I could stand corrected.
Oh, it might be the one you were typing in.
Further down.
I mean, I know we have an interest in having a replacement for someone before they're released from their contract, which would be a solution of a pure suitable replacement provision.
Well, can we go ahead and just say that's one solution so we can move to one doc over here?
Yeah.
So one idea is just move to suitable replacement, similar to Olathes.
Yeah,
Theirs was pure suitable replacement.
yeah.
And I don't know if you put Olathe in the notes, but I'm just
Yeah.
saying for us to understand it. And then what's the second thing you've got here?
Oh, so whatever we do, because we did not catch this the very first time we modified the late resignation provision, it has to be captured in our form contract that we issue, so that it matches the P&A. So we just need to remember that, whatever we do here. It's possible it won't change our form contract, but we just need to double check it.
So as far as, John, if you'll just make below brainstorm ideas, just miscellaneous notes is there another miscellaneous notes on, are people actually earning their 10 days? And should they not be, or how would you word that issue you raised, Jill? Folks that are resigning early that are taking 10 days, do they really have them?
Right, if they're a new hire, and, I mean, it doesn't have to be a new hire, but let's say they're a new hire, and they are resigning, should their 10 current temporary leave days be prorated?
And I just say, let's not lose track of that
Mm-hmm.
question, because you've raised a couple of times that people are doing this, which is more of a bind.
And it doesn't
Yeah,
wouldn't have to be a new
encourage-
hire, because there could be somebody who's already exhausted all of their leave,
Yeah.
so they're
Okay.
starting
So
the
if
year
they had,
again.
if they had banked leave, they could take sick days
Right,
that they'd accrued.
correct.
Okay. Maybe I misspoke.
No, I mean, that was,
That's a good
it was brought up.
I mean, if you just want to catch it somewhere, not under solution, but a follow-up.
You also talked about the summertime, having the 28 calendar day notice when it starts in the summer, then you could essentially sign a contract, resign from that contract, and your 28-day calendar notice happens before you even start the year.
So is
See
there
what
a
I'm saying?
solution there to not what? To not allow something or to change? What is the solution in there?
28 school days?
20, well, I
Or
mean,
whatever
School days
number
would
of school
accomplish
days.
it.
I
contract
would
days.
throw so a solution would be a modified suitable replacement with timelines built in. I think one thing to think about would be 28 days could fall in the middle of something really important. If we were gonna look at that, I would suggest looking at, and you can't leave till the end of a semester or something, like, or a quarter, like,
So in other words.
not on a random Wednesday in October.
Modifying, you're talking about modifying the,
Modified suitable
Modify the
replacement.
28 days to prevent resignations at certain times.
Right.
Jonathan, you got that as just not a hashed out idea, but an idea.
Yeah.
There just may be some ideas before we wrap up we should
we-
capture on this paper.
Are we brainstorming? Is that what we're
Yeah.
doing?
Well, we've only got a minute though, but I think if there's something out there, yeah. But then
That's something
if there's
really
something
quick.
out there, let's catch it on Jonathan's. He's doing notes.
Can we talk more about the KCK model of
Yeah.
some sort of liquidated damages during the summer, but after the contract has started?
Yep. I mean, I don't know how often this happens, that you sign a contract and you're like, wait a second, I regret that. Like, I wish I hadn't done that. Like, I know there's laws, maybe they're called lemon laws, where if you buy a car, you guys bought a car recently and they're like, you can bring it back in 3 days. But maybe like I regret this and a small penalty within this amount of time, or if you really want to take the sweeter deal from some other district, you've already committed to a fine, it's a little bit higher, or if it's so close to the school year that you're in a bind, then it's a little higher.
So is that sort of like the KCK model where you're tapering the amount based on timing?
Yeah.
What about, you said the idea of education up front? I don't know what you're doing
Well,
now, but that's what.
I do think that will be captured in our one sheet. Like, I definitely think your ability to resign would be part of a summary.
Yeah.
And I do think that will help, because it wasn't really common, but we definitely had a couple people, particularly new hires, who did not understand that they had signed a contract to work a specific amount of time.
It
I
is
probably
fine.
have more things to, but I mean, I don't want to.
Well, no, I mean, we said we did start late. I mean, I am okay to stay. Do you need to go?
I'm okay with that. I'm fine.
I was going to talk about, if the reason for leaving was working conditions or something that was happening to them in their building, how can we help solve that issue so they stay?
Yeah.
If it's something that's happening to them and making the working conditions unbearable,
Yeah.
Does that tie more into retention? Does it tie to, do we know why they're leaving? Does it tie to knowing how to reach an NEA rep? I mean, that kind of goes a little bit back to your desire to be able to communicate. But that's assuming they're new folks, though, or not.
No,
they
That-
weren't.
that's a
It would
point-
be general.
I think that's a point on the retention piece too,
Yeah.
because, and I don't know if we have this data available, but I would like to see the years of experience, or the years
Oh, real
of,
interesting.
Yeah.
working in the district for this spreadsheet. You know, how many years?
Years
has
of
each
experience and then
employee
maybe
had?
years in that current position.
Right.
Because some people might have switched to a new job title.
And so.
That
I'm
may give
assuming
us
the
some other ideas about
yeah.
retention.
I'm guessing they are digesting it like that, perhaps, the recruit, Shawnee Mission recruit group.
I don't know if they're getting that deep. But that's a good point. Yeah, we can-
When
I-
do
I
they-
think we
Yeah,
can
who's
find
late
research.
resigning? Is it new hires? Is it primarily secondary?
There's
Is
a
it?
larger
And where?
sped.
Yeah.
But I know that could tie into, difficulty hiring classified and how that can, play into their job when there's less classified staff. Which has been not just a Shawnee Mission issue.
Yeah.
Of less people.
Classified at all?
Yeah, I thought we were okay.
Okay.
I didn't
Good,
hear any-
good.
I
No, we
didn't-
just wanna make
I
sure.
didn't hear anyone, yeah, but I can stop. Okay, yeah. Thank you. Trying to save me from myself. Yeah, I mean, there's some fields here that I've hidden. The length in their position wasn't one of them, but we can easily grab that, at least for the last 2 years. We won't be able to do it for the other ones.
If this is something that we're wanting to look at this sort of data and information and have a more holistic solution that also addresses retention and the reasons why people may late resign? Is this something that we think we want to keep in this group, which I think is fine, or is it something where we feel like we need a subcommittee to look at it and come back with a recommendation? I cannot remember, I don't think we've ever done that for late resignation, but
I thought you said we
To
had
look
a
at the retention piece of it, Rachel, is
to
your
look
question?
at late, to just, every time we've raised this issue, did we ever have
It was
a,
me, you, and Jill.
We did.
and Linda.
okay. I'd be willing to serve again if we feel like we need to do a subcommittee.
Jonathan, will you add that as a possible solution, a subcommittee to explore the ideas that have been put out and perhaps look at others and come back with a recommendation?
And it could be a smaller one. I'm only thinking because of time of day to meet.
Yeah.
Since I'm .8 released, it gives me more flexibility.
Yeah.
Because I'm thinking
Yeah, I
about the
mean,
large subcommittee that I'm about to try to get together.
Yeah, that's
We're
a lot.
only going to be meeting like,
Yeah, I mean, I
certain
think
times, but-
just a suggestion, the three of us could be a core group, and if someone else wanted to jump in,
yeah.
they could, or, yeah.
You do it?
That'd be good, because then we'd have 2 and 2. Yeah. I worry, whenever we talk about, I don't want that stuff to get lost, right?
Yeah.
Because I do think that that is an important part of it, and if I'm sitting in one of our professional employees' shoes, I definitely want to hear about that other piece, and if we have people that are walking away mid-contract, what are we doing to try and reduce that? So I wouldn't want to lose that, and that takes time.
Yeah. Well, you've got some options out there. So in terms of next agenda, when are we meeting again? It's next week, and I think it's Thursday. And
Second?
should we revisit this at that time when we start? And then what's our next issue we would want to take on? So many of the issues were wrapped into that subcommittee, the big
Yeah.
subcommittee.
I mean, I think if we have a consensus on forming a subcommittee on this, then we can probably just tee up, that's a good work session, because it's a whole morning, we can probably move down on our spreadsheet. Even if we do form a subcommittee, we would not have time to report back. Right. So,
What else is on the spreadsheet that we can pick up next time?
And on that spreadsheet, do we want to make sure that the subcommittee that's in yellow there, that's covering all of those right there? Like, isn't it covering like multiple?
yes.
So how do we want to, in our big Excel sheet of items, how do we want to show that that's covering all of them? It's covering all 5, is that correct?
Yeah, it's covering
Yeah.
all 5, so we
Okay.
want to reformat that.
Sure, we'll figure that out.
So since we just did, looks like we actually have another district issue next, although I don't think it will take a long time.
What is the topic?
The low sub-fill rate.
What's your
I would
issue,
think,
what's your issue statement question? Do you have it right in front of you? How do we,
How do we have a higher sub-fill rate?
yeah. Doesn't everybody want to know that?
Right. And how do we reduce the burden on our professional employees?
We just met with Kelly today, and so we've got some really good stats that might be good to share with this group as a starter.
Yeah.
Want
Okay.
us to be prepared for that?
Okay.
And
Yes,
then-
okay.
Yeah, what else if we get through that?
And then we have 2 NEA issues next, staffing and caseload and leave. Are those ones that you can be prepared for?
Yeah,
Okay.
And then I think the other 2,
I think that NEA-7 cell phone policy could be done on one of our, we could schedule it for one of our 2-hour.
Yeah, one of our short.
Yeah, one of the shorter ones.
okay,
I mean, I don't know. Everything could be meatier than we think, but
yeah.
my initial thought would be that it wouldn't be as.
Next time, see what we want to do with the early resignation, which sounds like it could be subcommitteed,
Yep.
and then pick up the issue around, I just had that brain fog. Around,
Low sub-fill
low
rate.
sub-fill rate.
Staffing and caseload.
And leave
for
if we
professional
get to that,
employees.
yeah.
Yep.
All right. We never really talked about how this lines up with y'all's board budget cycle. Next time we should do that. Right, because at some point you guys are going to want a presentation from the benefits committee and you want to know the financial situation.
Which I think when we scheduled all these meetings, when I don't think you were here, Stephanie, I think we figured out the earliest that we could meet in May.
First
Didn't
one
we?
in May.
The first one in
Okay.
May.
Right after, I think we set up like a Tuesday even after the
Yeah.
board meeting.
I
Okay.
think we did figure that out, and it was,
So it's still a month or so out?
Yes.
More, yeah.
Did we
okay.
actually schedule May dates?
no, we didn't.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't have
So
it.
you're right, so we need to pick that up next meeting and be ready to schedule our May.
So there's a board workshop on the 8th of May.
Okay. I sent you an email though, didn't I? With like the earliest or something?
I thought we
figure it-
talked about it here.
Okay,
Yeah.
We talked about that week.
awesome. We'll be on time next time, guys.
Oh, I mean, you can't
Yeah, it happens.
predict that.
It's all good.